and welcome to Asia Gaming Brief's face-to-face series. Joining us today, we have Attorney Mel Racela, who's the Executive Director of the Philippines Anti-Money Laundering Council. How involved has the AMLC been in the whole process of allowing land-based casinos to offer online? And from your perspective, what's your opinion of this move?
Well, since casinos and whether land-based or internet-based are covered persons under the recent amendments to the Anti-Money Laundering Act, and this law was passed in 2017, and we issued our implementing rules and regulations. The AMLC has been very active in pursuing a strong AML CFT framework for the casinos.
And how much of a challenge does it present to you to have the casinos offering online gaming?
It is not really a challenge for us because that will be part, well, if they have a very strong framework, and we are supposing that that would include also their offerings in online games. And so it's really more of ensuring that they continue on strengthening their framework for anti-money laundering, as well as countering the terrorism financing. So, and since this is a new product for them or new service, the assumption is that they will also instill whatever practices they implement to counter money laundering, terrorism financing in the online platform as well.
Do they need to incorporate new technologies for know your customer, such as biometrics, to ensure that they know who is actually placing bets and where the money is coming from?
Well, we do not have any specific regulation for that, but we sort of recognize that they may adopt such technology. And in such case, we give them flexibilities in regard to digital conduct of digital KYC. For instance, if there is a need for the AMLC to request for this information, and if it's digital, then we will accept the digital submissions of this KYC. So it's not really something that we specifically require for the casinos, but they may adopt technologies to conduct KYCs.
Okay, so there's no specific rules that you've had to put in place regarding KYC to cover this particular new segment of the market, because it is quite new, isn't it?
Yes, there's no specific requirement.
Yeah. What about within the AMLC? Are you having to change at all the way you work with the casinos?
We think that there will be more enhancements to our on-site compliance checking to cover these kinds of services being offered by the casinos.
What about when it comes to safeguarding client data? Are you confident all of the structure is in place to keep client data safe? How will that work?
Of course, cybersecurity is very important to us, and currently, the frameworks that we really wanted the covered person, meaning the casinos, to have a very secure cyber system, and so. Of course, the identity of their customers should be one of the paramount concerns of the casinos. But I think we haven't issued such a specific regulation to cover that. Perhaps we are, because we are still at the baseline stage where we are having a baseline assessment of their framework, and perhaps in the next cycle of online or on-site compliance testing, we should be able to reconfigure and adapt our policies, and of course the controls that we must check in regard to their prevention of money laundering and terrorism financing.
So it's basically an evolving process. You will adapt and change your policies as you come across issues.
You'll be surprised that the land-based casinos have quite expectedly their framework is not that mature, but our assessment is that they are willing to improve or enhance their system, so or their entire AML CFT framework. And so we think we are confident that they will reach a certain level of maturity in the next few months.
How difficult is it to maintain the right balance between keeping these compliance measures in place and all the investment that goes into it and the ease of doing business for the operator? How do you reach that balance?
Well, I think that question is from the perception of the AML framework being a difficulty rather than an investment. But we treat investments in the IT system. We treat investments on AML compliance as investment. It's not an outright expense. If you are serious with the AML CFT framework, you will allocate some funds to invest for the future. So it should not be a hindrance for your operations.
The Senate recently passed some more amendments to the anti-money laundering bill in the Philippines. How confident are you now that that's robust enough to satisfy FATF?
We have mapped down the all the recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force in our mutual evaluation report, and this set of amendments are really intended to address those gaps or deficiencies indicated in our mutual evaluation report. And so, if we are able to pass all our proposals, this will address these deficiencies, and we're quite confident that we can avoid gray listing. However, I must add and emphasize that it is not just passing the law. That's why we're pushing for an early passage of the amendments, because we also need to demonstrate effective implementation. The FATF calls this as or termed this as demonstration of positive and tangible progress. So that is effective implementation. So we were asking Congress to give us at least 2 months to to show that we are implementing these amendments. So any last minute amendments will not satisfy the Financial Action Task Force. We need enough time to implement.
We covered the land-based sector there and their plans to go online. What about the POGOs? Are there any sort of specific concerns when it comes to the POGO operators and AML?
They have been covered by our guidelines. We call this the designated non-financial businesses and professions for the service providers. But for the POGOs, it's still the implementing rules and regulations for the casino sector. So we need to distinguish those two, because the POGOs are covered by the casino implementing rules and regulations. But for the service providers, they are considered as designated non-financial businesses and professions. The approach are different as well. For the POGOs, they are directly being co-supervised by PAGCOR and the AMLC. But for the service providers, PAGCOR merely, I think, accredits them. But the AMLC, they are considered covered persons under the DNFBP guidelines. And so initially, as mentioned a while ago, we conducted our on-site inspection. So we have to divide the on-site compliance checking to inspection as well as to actual on-site, to ensure that we are talking to the right person, to ensure that we know where the offices are, and so to ensure that there is a compliance officer to whom we can coordinate with in regard to the implementation of our rules and regulations, and the presentation of their respective prevention programs. So those are the steps that we have been doing. If only we were able to finish the inspection, then we could have proceeded with the on-site for those who are already ready to accept us in the conduct of our on-site compliance checking. However, since we need to really do this, we again, as mentioned a while ago, we configured our on-site compliance checking to off-site compliance checking. We have identified several activities that we cannot do off-site. We will just leave that in the future. Sometime we can do that, but we implemented all others. So based on our assessment, we can complete our off-site for the entire 75% of the entire on-site compliance checking. We leave the 25% when circumstances allow.
Must be a lot more challenging for you though, is it, with the POGOs? There's a lot more of them. Their customers are all over the world. It must be a different skill set for you, really.
I don't think it will be more challenging, but it will be a challenge. But you see, it's still the basic framework is still there. But perhaps we will rely more on technology to check those. But if we are, since we are familiar with the basics, we will only adapt in regard to technology.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us your perspective. I'm sure people will be extremely interested to hear in what's been happening in your efforts to improve the situation in the Philippines. So thank you very much, Atty. Racela, for your time today.